Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. Today is exciting. We're talking to an orthopedic hand surgeon, and what he does is he helps people identify, overcome, and prevent hand problems like pain and numbness. And I'm sure in today's day and age, with everybody on a computer and a phone, business is probably booming for you. But we're rocking out today with Wren McCallister. So, Wren, are you ready to rock?
Yeah, let's roll.
Perfect. So we always start off here on a good note. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Sure. Well, I think one of the key things I've noticed over the years is there's a sort of an information gap that's challenged people and led them to really prevent themselves from presenting to get help for injuries. And so one of the one of the ways I can highlight this information gap was there was a young lady we took care of who was from another country and had a really bad leg infection. And one of my buddies, anesthesia doctor, said, "Hey, is there any way you can help? We can help this individual." So I took a look at what they'd done over the years. And it struck me, it was just clear that they just had the wrong information. They were trying their best, but they really just didn't know exactly what to do and have the right information. So through his friends, we were able to get her over to this country, and we're able to provide some care that was pretty standard. I'd done it tons of times in a trauma hospital when I was training, and we were actually able to save her leg. She was supposed to have an amputation back there, and we were able to provide what really is, it wasn't magic. It was just standard care that they just didn't have the right information and supportive care. We had a great team, and she was able to go back and finish high school and have dreams of becoming a doctor someday. And so it just highlighted to me the importance of having the right information. And without the right information, you can get down a path that'll send you into confusion, and oftentimes also even lead you down a path where you're worse off than you would be. So, and that sort of parallels with what I do in my hand surgery practice, and what I've observed is that people struggle with getting the right information. And that's why I had started HandGuyMD, was to try to help people help people with that information.
Wow, that's amazing. Also highlights that you probably should get a second opinion when
Yeah.
when you get a diagnosis that's crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in that country, all the opinions were the same. It's just a matter of information. So, but yeah, all the opinions were kind of the same. They tried. It wasn't anything was bad. It was incomplete care, and they couldn't quite get over the hump because they didn't know what to do. So, but yeah, definitely anything serious, you want a second opinion, no question.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now with the good notes, sometimes there's some bad notes. Sometimes things don't go as planned. Sure, that's pretty crazy in your area.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, can you share with us something that didn't go as planned and how you recovered?
Yeah. So, one of the things that's interesting is, when you think about, if you're starting a business or you're doing something, as a surgeon, we're very ordered. We like things to proceed with structure. And so, it was a few years ago when this idea sort of germinated and realized, hey, there's an issue here, there's a challenge, and I can help overcome it. And it's like, okay, well, this is what it would look like. And this is how I can do it, and start to put stuff together. And all of a sudden, 2-3 years go by, and it's like, dude, what's going on? Like, I'm still, you're still putting it together. And so it's kind of the idea, there's really no perfect time. And so finally, it just last year just kind of crystallizes, like, look, it just start here, and just keep moving forward, and put it piece by piece. And so it won't be complete when it starts, but it's enough to help people. And what got me was I looked back and said, look, I have an opportunity to help a tremendous amount of people, far more than the thousands I help in my local practice. And every year that I waste, that's fewer people that I can help. So that was kind of the point. Just reached kind of a pressure point where it's like, you got to just get this going and start helping people, because even if it's not perfect, it's still going to help people, and it's going to build over time. And you make further distinctions as you get going too. So I think the biggest thing is it doesn't have to be perfect. There's no perfect time, and you just got to get it going. And that was kind of for me, the big challenge was I had this idea of what it would look like. And it just, myself with the practice and busy, it just kind of, as you get going, it can kind of get away from you a little bit, and you got to dial it in and just get going and get after it.
Wow. Isn't that a great analogy for pretty much any business?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you gotta get out there. I mean, that's the thing, is that things kind of like crystallize, and they get more focused as you keep moving down a path, right? But if you just
Yep.
sort of waiting for it to be perfect, you might never get out of the gate, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's an easy thing to do. I mean, I can read about this stuff, and intellectually I knew it was the right thing to do, but then conceptually it's like, okay, well, this is what it's got to look like to serve people at the highest level. And then you realize the problem is, when you keep thinking like that, you never actually really step in. And so you got to just get going, and then and trust that no one will see it in the beginning anyways, which is okay. And then also, as you get going, you're still helping people. So comes from the right place, and then it's just a matter of continuing to evolve it over time.
Agree. Well, and that's a good point. I mean, very few people will see it, but guess who will see it? The people who will see it were the people that really need it and are looking for it.
Yeah,
Right. And
that's
they
true.
don't care what it looks like. They don't care that it's not the, best designed, resource that they can find. They just need the information right now.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, very true, very true. And that's a challenge, because a lot of times if you're in your area, you're an expert in your area, you know what it should look like, but it's amazing how people on the other side have no concept. So for music, for you, what you may think is a terrible song, someone may be like, man, that's actually pretty good. Our MRI technician or their MRI manager is actually back at the Grammys right now. He had his first solo album come out, and he's like, oh, this isn't perfect. And dude, you can wail. Like, this is awesome. Like, this sounds really, really good. I was sitting work and just listened to his entire album. And it's like, I didn't want to turn it off. It didn't, if it was like perfect, it just melded in and out of the background and stuff. And it's like, so for something that he thought, oh, there's a problem with this, a problem with that. For me, it was like totally perfect. And that's kind of the analogy there. It's like, we kind of get this in our head of what it should be, but
Yeah.
really.
Yep. Well, and music is a really good example of that, because I think that especially nowadays, I mean, most, musicians from the 70s would consider today's music to be not very good.
Yeah.
But, they're selling boatloads of records and
Yeah.
well, not records, but singles nowadays.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, everything is very subjective, and, for the person that's looking for it, they just need the information, right?
Yep. That's true. Very
So
true.
now let's get into a little bit of the practice, and I mean, you have a practice. It's interesting that it's called a practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what is your approach to getting good at what you do and staying good at what you do?
Well, that's excellent. Yeah, it really is. We had to come from sports. Perfect practice makes perfect in the sense that you want to drill fundamentals, but really, it really is about repetitive and doing it over and over. So I specialize in hand surgery. I've got 9 partners. We all have a subspecialty, for example. And what that does, it allows you to get really, really good at what you're doing, allows you to make distinctions faster and faster, and it's very efficient for someone on the other side. So the only way you get there, though, is to focus on that area and drilling on the fundamentals. And it's no different than a sport. There's basics. Sort of block and tackle, follow the fundamentals in anything that you do, and then you've got to repeat it, and you've got to do it over and over. And it's, we had this saying in surgery. It's there's a chef in the kitchen, right? And they're making a cake, and there's some people get great outcomes and other people don't. And they'll tell you what they do in the operating room, but they don't realize something. They don't even know a step they're doing that they don't even think to articulate. And it's kind of until you do it over and over and over, you start to make those distinctions. And maybe the same thing for you. If you're writing a song or something, you may not even understand what you're doing. You're just kind of doing it instinctively. And the only way you get to that point is over and over and over and over. You just keep practicing and just keep drilling it. And you can't do it over and over if you don't love it. And that's that's a key point. So you enjoy what you're doing, and you just have to really get after it and stick with the fundamentals. And then by keeping your scope narrow, that enables you to go deeper and deeper in that area of expertise, which I think helps as well. It gets challenging when you start to spread out. Then you start to be like, oh, I haven't done this case in 3 months. You have to, start reading and things. Just last week, we were doing a case I hadn't done in a little while, but know how to do it. And there's a series of steps. And I was telling the nurse afterwards, I said, it's interesting. I call them idiot guides. They're technique guides that just kind of show you the steps. And I said, it's interesting. I think I did a step out of order, but it didn't matter because I did intuitively what needed to be done. It came out perfect. And it was like, it was this idea that, I've done this so much now. I know how to do this, and I don't need a guide. I just need a piece of metal and a bone, and then I can make it right because I understand what to do. The only way you get there is by doing something over and over and practicing. That's how you get good at it.
Yeah. Wow. That was packed with a bunch of cool stuff to talk about. Like, number one, one of the other interesting things you mentioned is when you're teaching something to somebody else, it really gives you an opportunity to figure out exactly what you're doing. Because you're right. A lot of the things that you do when you're an expert at something, you don't realize you're doing it anymore. And I know that, trying to teach someone a song on the guitar or whatever it is, and you're just like, oh, you just do this. And they're like, what did you just do there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is what I did. And so you really get to break it right down, right? But then the other big thing that you mentioned is about how to really specialize in something. And I think that, you know, obviously, when someone is looking for someone to get something done, they're not going to believe that you're perfect at everything. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you are, they're probably not going to believe that you are perfect
Yeah.
at everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, when they're looking for something specific, they're going to say, I need a specialist in X, right? And
Yep.
so I think that a lot of people are afraid to niche down in whatever business that they do because they think, well, I'm going to be turning away business. But that's not necessarily true because number one, you can get really good at something, and especially nowadays with the internet, the playing field is huge. It's not like there's one person in your city that's looking for something. It's the whole world that could be looking for
Correct.
something, right?
Yep.
But also the better you get at it, the more specialized you get at it, the more you can charge. So,
That's true. Yeah.
you know, it all evens out in the end, right?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I think you're right, especially the analogy to business. People, they talk about the riches and the niches, right? And getting narrow, and you think, oh, I'm gonna turn away X number of people. Years ago, I heard a guy say, it was interesting. He said, don't worry that you don't have hundreds of people. Just be excited you've got 10 people you're helping, and kind of growing that nidus. And it's those 10 people that you're helping that you're making an impact on. And as you kind of stay narrow and focused, you'll get known for that area, and then you'll have credibility. So if you're trying to be all things to everybody, you're kind of a jack of all trades and a master of none, right? And people sense that, and you can tell when you interact with someone. It's like people will see, like, I know nothing about heart disease, high cholesterol. I mean, I could, but if they're talking to a primary care doctor, they might brush off, oh, this handy, oh yeah, whatever, do this, do that, take it, go see therapy, but they're not really getting help. And yet, so when they come to see me, it's laser focused, it's dialed in, and that really benefits them, because the rest is really a waste of time. And that's something I see a lot of, is people spend 2 or 3 months sort of monkeying around. It's like, oh, I'm really sorry, but this is what you need to do. This is the correct diagnosis, and it's the same thing as in business, as you're narrowed down. If your focus is a certain kind of, selling pay-per-click ads or something, it's like, as I was getting on Facebook earlier, I was like banned. I had some guy from Croatia, steal my account and all this kind of crazy stuff, trying to sell cats and stuff. But trying to figure it out on your own, it can be a mess. And when you start talking to people, you can tell when someone doesn't really know, and they're just kind of, oh yeah, I kind of do all this stuff. And then I finally found a guy who was like, no, dude, this is what you do. A, B, C, D. It's like, boom, can I pay you? And he's like, no, it's okay. You don't have to pay me. We're just chatting for 45 minutes. It's totally cool. I'm like, that's awesome, because this guy just nailed exactly it. So now when I need something, I'll go back to this guy, because I know in that specific area, he's got it nailed down.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And especially in today's world of marketing, like a lot of people are, the internet is huge. And when you're trying to build your site, when you're trying to build your platform, you've got bots that are going around like Google that's looking for content. And the more specialized you are, the more you're going to be showing up in people's searches. So, not only does it make sense from from everything we just talked about, but even from a technology perspective and a marketing perspective, the more niched in you are on whatever it is that you're an expert at, the better it's going to be for your overall marketing strategy when it comes to online marketing.
Yeah, no, that's actually an excellent point, because we go through this. We're building a therapy website for our practice, for our clinics, and there's a bunch of, they sent 74-page PDF to look at, and I'm like, oh God, I can't look at this. I'll look at it on Sunday. It's like going to make me dizzy. And then when I finally looked at it, I realized there was really only 3 pages, and the rest was every single condition had 4 pages. And it's like, hey, you could probably cut this down a little bit. And like, no, actually, you want this stuff buried under an accordion bar for SEO stuff. And what it gets at is it's kind of interesting. YouTube does a lot of this, like with the engagement. Providing superficial information isn't really helpful. It's the in-depth stuff that drives people to read and consume. And so that's what you get at. When you're an expert, you have the ability to talk about this stuff, not repetitively, but really in depth. And that's what engages people. And therefore, the algorithms and the bots are trying to pick up on that. So that's rewarded in that context.
Nice. Just want to make sure that people understood that gold tip you just said, buried under an accordion bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, you got to
Yes.
get that content on there, but it is going to be way too much for people to process, if it's all just right on your website, right? So put
Yep.
it somewhere because it needs to be there for SEO, but not so that the user is going to get overwhelmed with information. So good job on that one.
Cool.
Now let's talk a little bit about the jam room. So, what makes this a successful home office for you?
Well, it's interesting because I ever since, even college, playing sports in college, a very fluid lifestyle. So I got 3 kids, and I've sort of taught myself to just adapt, and just wherever I'm at, I've got to learn to plant and just focus and do what I'm doing, because there's no perfect spot, right? So, but sometimes I'm comfortable downstairs in the front. My wife's like, "Hey man, can you get upstairs?" Like, it's like you're working in the front room. That's not cool, So, and she works from home as well. So, there's an environment, there's an intellectual environment, something that stimulates you, that gets you in the right, mood to think. So you got to think about that kind of stuff. You can't have distractions. And then there's a mechanical environment, and that's really, from a hand surgeon's perspective, that's one of the big things that I see is, with COVID hitting, everyone went home. They were at work, they had the desk set up. For the most part, things were in tune. Now they're home. You're sitting in your bed. You're lying back with your laptop. You're at your kitchen table, things like that. And so designing an environment that works for you mechanically as well is really important. And one of the things our body is not designed to do is to sit for long periods of time in a single spot, which is what we end up doing at a desk and things like that. So the body is designed for movement. The flip side of that is we're not designed for constant movement. So there's a concept in the musculoskeletal system called rest and recovery. And so it's what we do at a desk or with a computer is no different than a professional soccer player, baseball player. You can't play 3 soccer games in a week, 90 minutes. You're gonna tear a hamstring, you're strain a tendon. And it's because there's not enough time for recovery of the musculoskeletal system, not enough time for rest. And so if you overexert, you'll end up with these issues where basically the tissue breaks down. The body has a tremendous capacity to heal itself, and it will do it if you let it. If you give it proper sleep, if you give it proper rest, proper nutrition, it'll pretty much take care of most things itself. And so when people get into work environments where they sit for a long time at a keyboard with awkward positions and things, that's where you start to get pains and tendonitis and things like that. So designing a mechanical environment to benefit you is really important. So you're not in awkward positions and giving yourself trouble. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. It does make sense for sure. And you're right. I mean, it's when you're working from home, like it's very challenging to set up the boundaries of when you're working, when you're not working, right? When you're
Yep.
working in an office, I mean, it's obvious. You
Yeah.
leave the office, you go home.
Yeah.
But when you're working at home, and especially when you love what you do, like most of
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs do, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's 9 o'clock. You know what? I got an idea. All of a
Yeah.
sudden you're working, and then it's midnight, and then it's 2. So, having those routines, like, do you have sort of routines already set up where you are working, not working, all that stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. Monday through Thursday, I'm really at my practice. So we start early. I'm a managing partner of our group, so I have a few more administrative responsibilities. But Monday through Thursday is really focused on surgery, and then the weekends are when I work on HandGuyMD, and so Fridays tend to be the day when I do most of these things that are related to that. Though you're absolutely right. It's hard to shut it off. So if I have a half surgery day, I'll do something in the afternoon, or between cases, I kind of have a list of things I want to work on. And again, that gets to, a little bit of the, I guess, the surgeon personality. You kind of like to hit something and finish it. So that's something I've had to learn, is to be able to take things in chunks and pieces, and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this now. I've got 15 minutes while they do a block. Well, and then I'll come back to it tomorrow. And so that's a learning process in and of itself to try to be more efficient. And then there's always a negotiation with the family. Years ago, I'd done an MBA. It's like, okay, dad needs like 2 hours Saturday morning, then we'll go do stuff. And it's all, you're right. It's all, if you love what you're doing, it's always hard to find that balance. But that's a part of the routine is kind of Monday through Thursday, operating in clinic, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, as I call it, do the fun stuff.
And do
I
some
like the other stuff
negotiating.
too. Yeah. And so a little negotiating. That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Right on.
Hey Rockstar, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. If you didn't know already, my business is Creative Crew Agency. We build websites. Now, let's talk about your website for a minute. Most people realize that at this day and age, we need a website, but we don't really know what the website is supposed to do. And sometimes you'll just go and build a website for the sake of building a website. What I do is I make sure that your website actually accomplishes a goal. Now, there are 3 main goals to most websites. Number 1 is to provide information and build credibility. Number 2 is to schedule some sort of appointment and get them onto a sales call. Number 3 is to sell something like an e-commerce site. Now, when you're setting your website, you have to be very mindful that the visitor doesn't know what to do. And so you have to provide them with a roadmap that leads them down a path to wherever you want them to go. On my website, I want them to be on a free consultation. So that's why when you go to creativecrewagency.com, you'll see information about scheduling a free consultation. Now, for you though, I'm going to provide you with an extra link so that you can get your free website audit. Go to creativecrewagency.com/free website audit and schedule an audit with me. And I'll go through your website live and determine what we can do to improve your conversions and make sure that you're getting the business from your website. Go to creativecrewagency.com and we'll see you there.
So what about, what about learning from others? Like, are you a person that does a lot of additional learning to keep yourself on top of both business and your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned I'd done an MBA years ago, a few years ago now, but it took about 5 years to complete it. And it's something that part of it was from my kids were in school, they see dad studying. My youngest was born when I was a fellow, so they never really saw any of that. And so absolutely, continuing to educate that. And then all the time, I'm always learning. I spend probably more than I would like on courses and things. And you don't always get to all of them. But as I've gone through it, I found that it's interesting. So back to this expert concept is people will say stuff. And my thing is to kind of get to the root, right? Like, it's like if I hear it from 3 different people, it's like, well, what are they saying in common? Where does that come from? Because the reality is very little in life is new, right? There's very little that's actually new. Most of it's recycled or, building on the shoulders of giants that came before you, so to speak. So that I like to kind of get down, if I can, closer to the root level, because to me, it's hard to just take something in and apply it without understanding it. And so understanding it, I think, is the key. And it lengthens the curve a little bit, right? You can't get everything in like 30 seconds and sound bites and things. So you have to spend time investing, reading, germinating, like a lot of stuff. I like to read at night before I go to bed. I do believe your subconscious works. You kind of mull stuff over while you're sleeping. You're not even aware of it. And it's important. And you can't, a lifelong learner, it's not a label, or it's not something, it's not a thing you say you do. It's just kind of who you are, if that makes sense. And to be in business and surgery, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because things change, and things are changing faster and faster now. I mean, back 20, 30 years ago, things could stay the same for a little while. But now, I mean, geez, even just the way that we market things, the way that we, handle each other, the world changes so fast. You do have to keep on top of things. So how do you decide what you're going to be learning? Like, do you have sort of, a year planned of this is what I want to learn, or is it sort of day by day, by feel?
Well, it's a little bit, I guess, maybe task oriented. In other words, these are the things that I want to do. So what do I need to learn to do that? So for example, I wanted to get a quiz up and running, for example, because I thought that would be a great way to. One of the challenges, I'm not with HandGuyMD, I'm not practicing medicine. There's a key distinction, but it's the information. And so it's how can I kind of interact with people? And it's like, I need to figure out this. So I started figuring out how can I, maybe from someone in Croatia can code it or whatever. And then I found these quiz funnels, which work. So then I, went through learning that. So the process of understanding that. There's some other traffic stuff, some YouTube stuff, and it comes sequentially because I end up working, a week, kind of Friday through Sunday, and then I can kind of get back after it. A lot of courses and a lot of talks or things that happen, I noticed they're like, Monday through Thursday, 1, 2 o'clock. It's like, man, I'm in clinic. I can't, it'd be great to see that, but I can't do it. So it's really, I guess it's task oriented and sequential. There is a larger picture of where I'm trying to go, but then each step along the way, pick it up. And then the other part of that is, I think also you don't have to do everything, but you have to understand it in order to manage it. And I do think you get in trouble when you just turn something over blindly to someone and you don't have any concept of what's happening. That's where you get ripped off. that's where you get screwed. It's funny, you build websites. We had a company build us a website, and it was embarrassingly expensive for our practice. And I'm like, and then as I started learning more, I'm like, man, we just got hosed. The down, it's like, you guys spent this, how much? It's like, man, you did not need to spend that much. And for the functionality, this is probably, because nobody knew. It's like, hey, we should just have this done. Let's go find this. And, a shiny company comes in, they give you a pitch, and it looks good. Okay, we'll do it. And so without any knowledge, you can't manage it. So that's important too. You don't have to do everything, but you have to understand it.
No, I agree. It's funny. I'm having this conversation more and more as time goes on about how the whole web design, web development industry it's the wild, wild west out there right now. Like, it's just, you got companies out there charging like insane amounts of money. And the one thing that I found was very, very interesting, I think, really, is that the more off-brand and off like the site is, the more someone paid for it. It's like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's messed up.
Bespoke.
Yeah.
It's bespoke. Yeah.
I just it was always fascinating me, is I'd get somebody that'd come to me and, hey, I got the site, it's not doing what I need it to do. I just need this and this done. Can you do it? And then I would jump in there and go, yeah, okay, let me get a login and go look at it. And it turns out it's just built in a way that you can't do anything to it. Like, it's like,
yeah.
It's all custom programmed. I'm like, dude, it would take me months to learn what this guy did in order to change it. And I mean, I could charge you less to rebuild the site.
Yeah.
From scratch, and like rebuilding the entire site that they paid tens of thousands of dollars for, and I could charge them a couple $1,000 for it. Like, it's just insane. How did they come up with that number?
They just pull it out of their head. And then when you do this custom coding, see, this is what, so there's two levels. One is our larger organization was like into the 6 figures, which is, I think, insane. We were 5 figures, which is still insane. But They came to us. I said, hey, I need this to be done. Oh, well, the code can't do this. I'm like, dude, these things are templates. Like it is not that hard to, and I'm not a coder, but so a little bit don't know, but I'm like, it's not that hard. It's plug and play. Like, this is all object-oriented programming. It goes back to, what happened in the late 90s where, so this is not, but when they custom code, it becomes an abyss. And all of a sudden you're beholden to the magic person at the top of the hill who custom codes. And it's almost like it's an artificial barrier, because you can do most of this stuff off a template. There is probably some coding, there's some pieces, but it's not that hard, I don't think, to build that on the back end without making this behemoth. We had the same thing. We had a new group come in, they looked at the old website and they just laughed. And they said, it'll be, it'll be cheaper. And they basically rebuilt it with way better functionality, speed, all that kind of stuff. And it all comes off templates, basically, for the most part.
Yep. It's insane what's going on. I don't know. I don't know what to do to really fix that, other than I think that there's got to be some real good information, I think, that has to go out there to entrepreneurs on how to choose the right company. Because even nowadays with websites, people don't have the attention span that they used to have to actually even go through an entire website. Most businesses are better off to have one landing page.
Well, that's a point I was just going to say. That's excellent. That's exactly it. I mean, the website of 2005 and 6 doesn't exist anymore. I mean, basically, you need a landing page. In essence, you need a way to interact, to provide the information, to take the next step. You can take them on a journey that can involve other pages. But you're right, because if you confuse, you lose, right? Confusion, it creates, if you get confused, you click off. And so they have these heat maps and stuff you can do on a website where you can see where people go. And you can see when you start to put complex text, everything turns blue, right? Because no one's there.
Nope.
And so the more intuitive it is. And so when you're designing the web page, basically you want a simple message. And this is where, being an expert and also thinking and learning, and then learning from other people too, because we don't have to make these mistakes. If you start learning from other people, they'll tell you what they're doing. Because this is a cool thing I think about business, especially when you get in the internet, is that I'm not going to take money from anybody who's already making tens or hundreds of millions a year, right? Like, I'm no threat to them. And most people are, to some extent, feel pretty damn lucky in a sense that it's like, geez, I can leverage this. All of a sudden I'm making tens and, or 100 million, So there's a, geez, if I can do this, someone else can, and then they're happy to share. And when we see the same thing, this generativity, and you go Maslow's hierarchy, right, of the things you need food, you need shelter. And as you get to the higher up, after you're stable, secure, then you want to give back.
Yeah.
And I think especially in business, that's the concept of mentorship. And so people are happy to share these things. So when someone who's got a business that's doing 8-9 figures says, hey, we killed our website, we're doing landing pages, like they're telling you something. They're not trying to deceive you. You're not going to threaten them. They're actually trying to help you. And this idea of making the journey simpler for whoever you serve, I think is really important. And it's not easy to do in the sense that it requires thought, but that's the key. And that gets to the websites.
Well, and I think that's I'm hoping that this is something that's going to be valuable for someone who's looking for websites, because what I can see it from, I've been building websites for a while, so I can see how you can be like, oh, geez, man, I make so much more money on a, 5-10 page website than I do on a landing page. So, do I really want to sell this person a landing page? So I can see how you'd be like, well, this is going to destroy my business. But follow me here for a second, because what I've noticed is that the work now has moved into the strategy side and to the business coaching side of, okay, it's more of it now a coaching call or a consultation to figure out what this business needs in order to build the right landing page, because you don't necessarily have to charge a whole lot less for that final product. It's just, instead of being in 5 pages of stuff that no one's ever going to click on, it's one really targeted page of what the actual client is looking for that's totally gonna generate leads. There's a whole bunch of back-end stuff that you can be doing that you can be charging for, so you're not losing a ton of money, because it's just, if your whole model is based on how many pages you build. Right? No, you're absolutely right, because the reality is, if you build a whole bunch of pages, it's not going to convert, so the client's not going to be happy anyways. If you build one page that converts, they're going to love you. And you're absolutely right, because that's the hard thing for people, learning how to write copy, right? It's all this stuff is a skill, right? You can learn how to do it. You have structures, there's resources, again, that gets to learning and mentorship, and you can find the resources. But if you understand the basics and can help someone put together a page and say, hey, look, man, that's way too cluttered. You know everything about this, but let me help you distill it. Let me be the novice who doesn't know, and say, this confuses me, this doesn't, and help them test in the market, test, keywords and things like that. Yep. Like, if you can help them narrow that down, then you get them a page that converts. That's worth more than 7 or 8 pages, honestly, because it gets them going. And then they'll come back to you for repeat, hey, I've got another idea for an offer. Let's build another page, things like that. Yep, absolutely. I think you're 100% right. Totally. There's definitely a business still there. There was a funny thing. It said somebody wrote a letter. Hey, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's, I think that's something that also is another barrier for people, that it's just a difference between the value that you're providing. Some people think that, this page is only, it's just one page. How do you spend so much money? Well, it took a long time and a lot of effort and a lot of thought to get to the one page, as opposed to just dumping 6 pages of work, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's amazing when you read a sales letter or something and you realize some of these ones that are just masterfully done. It's like literally every single word is engineered and every single word is written with intent. And it's like, well, how can someone do that? And it's like, well, it's a structure, it's a schematic, and it really is. There's thought, because what emotion does this word evoke? What does this one, is this one redundant, and things like that. So yeah, you're right. It's like, it does. That's a great saying. I can't remember. I think it was, I don't know if it goes back to, it was a long time ago, Napoleon, or sometime, or if I had more time, I'd have written you a shorter letter.
Yep. It's funny. So it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
Well, I think that the coolest thing that I've found is that my wife is a health coach, and she's kind of taught me a lot of this stuff going along. And I realized that, so I call it kind of healthy hands, but this idea that foundational health, how you sleep, think, eat, and move has more of an impact on your hands and your health in general than really anything I can do in an operating room, because I end up treating the end result of diabetes, thyroid conditions, things like that, obesity, all these things cause problems, and then you get mechanical issues with your hands. and then I just kind of come in and fix the problem. But it's like if you can get to that ahead of time, you'll never end up in my office or in my operating room. So for me, that's the most exciting thing. And so I kind of call it healthy hands, because there's a foundational health component and how it impacts your hand. So that's something I'm excited to kind of build on going forward, and through HandGuyMD and work with my wife as well, help people to get these concepts of foundational health really dialed in, because it's another example though of where it's overwhelming, right? Like, you can read about eating. What do I eat? Do I do this? Do I do that? It's not that complicated. I mean, there's really, everybody's an individual, so you can't just cookie cutter, diets on top of people. And at the same time, there's just some fundamental principles. Our body is designed to kind of solve itself for the most part. So if you give it the right inputs, it'll give you the right output. And sleep is one of the biggest ones. Movement is really important as well. So pretty simple things, but not always things people want to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. People like the quick fix, right? So is there a pill I can take for that?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think things are kind of coming around. I mean, I do see things, over the last few years, especially, where people are starting to kind of like get back to, because, back in the day, it was all about prevention and about healthy, lifestyles. And then it just kind of got to the point where people were like, well, either that, or I can just stay up all night and I can just totally abuse my body and just take pills and everything will be fine. And I think we're now coming back around, right?
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it. I mean, years ago, I built a surgery center, and I used to come home at night, and my wife would fall asleep at 10, and I'd be on the computer till 1 a.m, with the Lord, all the architects and stuff. And I found this amazing thing. Like, if you don't want to go to sleep, stare at a computer screen. It's really weird. I read a little bit. I got really tired. I opened the laptop, and man, I was up till 1:30. I felt, felt great. And then you learn that that's because it's messing with your brain. But we're all guilty of it. And when you're younger, you can get by, you can get by in 3-4 hours of sleep, get up, do your thing. Maybe you're a little grumpy, a little coffee, you're fine. But the reality is you're really cheating yourself in the long run. And it's interesting. I tell people with diabetes, it's an interesting disease because you're never going to feel it. Like, you're not going to feel the effects of it. You won't unless your sugar is super high and you get sick, but you're not going to feel it. You're not going to know anything different. But over a long period of time, it will literally kill you. And that's the same thing. If you don't sleep right, if you don't get adequate sleep, if you don't exercise, you're not going to feel those things day in and day out. But over a long time, it will definitely shorten your lifespan. And so that's where I feel like if we can just get people to explore these principles and just and improve what they're doing. Again, back to this, there's no perfect time, there's only now concept, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to be perfect in everything, but even if people made a 10% improvement in their sleep or 20%, it would make a huge impact on their quality of life. So
even 1%.
Even 1%. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything you're doing. We used to have this analogy as younger, you're pushing this giant boulder up a mountain, right? And as long as you're pushing the boulder, you're doing okay. And if you keep going forward, you've got momentum and you're going to be fine. You're never going to get to the top of the mountain, but as long as you keep pushing it, you're going to do fine. And that's kind of the concept here.
Love it. So how do we find out more?
So HandGuyMD is the website. And again, as I said, it's not perfect now. So the main thing I'm focused on is numbness and tingling, but for your folks, I'd love to give them, I have a guide to ergonomics, as well as a video that has the top ergonomic recommendations. And so I'm happy to give them that for free. If they'll just shoot me an email at drwren@handguymd.com, I'm happy to send that to them. And it's a PDF that goes through the principles. So we talked about rest and recovery, and so they can learn what they need to do to stay safe and how they can make adjustments in their own home. Because I know a lot of people working from home, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get in these awkward positions, and it gets back to your mechanical environment. The sort of the psychological environment, that's a little bit more on you to figure out how to balance that with family and things. But the mechanical environment I can really help you with. And so I think both these resources will be terrific. So again, happy to give it to any of your listeners. Just email me at drwren@handguymd.com and just mention you saw this podcast. I'm happy to send it to them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Great. Hey, can I have one too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send it to you. We're done. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Dr. Wren. This is awesome.
Appreciate it, Tim. Thanks. Have a great day.
And to the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment, and we'll see you next time with the Work at Home Rockstar.